Welcome to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me today Gwen Preston. I've known Gwen over the last number of years at the Metals Investor Forum. She's been a newsletter writer for a number of years. Always admired her work. She has a background in science. She has an undergraduate degree in science from McGill, and I guess a master's degree in journalism from University of BC. Two very, very strong institutions that she was educated in, and really pleased to have her join me today to talk about West Red Lake Gold Mines. Now she is the Vice President of Communications for that company, and I think she's putting all her skills to work in I think, a very good company. It looks like things are really turning around for the Madsen Gold Mine in Ontario, which had its difficulties in the past, but with a lot of capital and some new management, it looks like things are really on the upswing for this company. Before I say hello to Gwen, I should tell you that the West Red Lake Gold Mines trades in Canada, WRLG. Down here in the States, you can purchase it as I have under WRLGF. 348 million shares, about 60, I think 61 cents, something like that, about that in US money.
Yeah.
So it gives it a market cap around $210 million, which I think is very low for where I expect this company is going to go. 517 million, I think, fully diluted shares, something like that.
Yep, that's the right number.
All right,
Yep.
Glenn, nice to see you again. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's so lovely to see you, Jay.
It's good. Yeah, we've had many years together with the Metals Investor Forum, mostly in Vancouver, sometimes in Ontario, sometimes in Toronto.
Yes.
So the Madsen mine, I know as an analyst and newsletter writer, you covered it for years. I think maybe even when you were at the Northern Miner, you might have talked about it. It had its difficulties. Of course, most gold miners have had difficulties over the last number of years. It's been not been easy. It's a tough business to start with.
Yeah.
However, the remake and when I guess it was Frank Justra provided some capital. Capital is always very important in the mining industry, big, essential. And then the new management team. Can you maybe talk about what's the difference now? Because it really does seem to me, and I've been watching it closely, that you are going to make this thing work, that this is going to be a very successful mining project. Talk about the differences now between now and the previous ownership. It wasn't necessarily their fault, I think, entirely, but conditions have been improved. But just, what's the difference now?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's for sure the appropriate starting point. I mean, you referenced that I've covered the Madsen mine for years, like as a journalist and then as a newsletter writer. In fact, I think Pure Gold's visit to the Madsen mine was the first I did as Resource Maven. Just as it turned out, as a newsletter writer, the first thing I did was go and visit the Madsen mine back in 2014. That's when they bought the asset, and that's when I started my newsletter. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the asset. And I will note that, the Pure Gold situation happened. That company became incredibly richly valued as they poured their first bar of gold. Pure Gold did some very good work. Let me be clear. Pure Gold drilled 180 kilometers into the Madsen deposit. That defined the resource that we as West Red Lake are still working with today. Really nice resource in and around the historic mine, but with some nice chunky areas to it. 1.7 million indicated ounces, so the medium level of confidence, grading 7.5 grams per ton gold. So like a really nice deposit. And of course, they permitted that thing, which is an incredibly valuable piece of work. And then they built a really good mill, and then they put it into production. The real problem is that as they moved from sort of the getting ready to build into the actual build and operate side of that process, they moved beyond what that group had done before. And so mining is an incredibly complicated beast.
Yes,
and so if you are unfamiliar with, if you haven't previously operated the machine of that complexity, you aren't likely to understand how important all of the different components of that machine are. And so the way I simplify it is that they just started cutting some corners and they didn't realize how important those corners were. And so the easy, if I'm distilling it down, they cut corners in how much drilling they did between defining the resource,
Mhm.
and mining that resource, there's almost in every mine, there's another round of drilling that happens there. It's called definition drilling if
Right.
it's in an underground mine. It's called grade control drilling if it's in an open pit mine. Um, and that's what gives you that next layer of data and therefore confidence before you
Mhm.
actually do the final mine design and then go ahead and start mining it. They just didn't do that step.
Yeah.
And so their resource model was not sufficiently accurate or high
Mhm.
enough resolution. They just didn't know accurately enough where the gold was. And
Sure.
so then they didn't mine in quite the right places. They expected to deliver high grade 9 gram per ton material to the mill. They delivered really 3.5 gram per ton material to the mill. So that you don't need to know a lot about mining to hazard to guess that that isn't going to work out.
Mhm.
So not doing the necessary work on defining the deposit was one corner that they cut. I would say also on sort of how to build and operate the mine there
Mhm.
were quite a few infrastructure projects that I think the mentality was we'll build that later once we're in cash flow. We'll
Oh,
build that
yeah.
later once we're
Yeah.
in operation. But unfortunately, not having those things set up meant that they never got to cash flow because they had a really inefficient mine.
Right.
And so low grade and inefficient, so low grade, high cost, that was the downfall of Madsen in under the prior operator. And you referenced my newsletter days. I went down there. I mean, I had I had sold out of pure gold when it was very richly valued. Thankfully, I had lucky timing, good timing on that one. When I saw this deal for a Frank Justra-led group to buy the
Yeah.
Madsen mine, I was immediately cynical. I was like, what are they going to do that's so different? But at the time, I didn't understand this corner cutting thing. I didn't really get what had happened.
Mhm.
But I was able to go visit the Madsen mine shortly after West Red Lake purchased it. I was not an employee at the time, or there was no thought of being an employee at the time. But I got to go on the site visit, and they had restaffed just on a basic level, the key people for geology and each
Mhm.
department.
Mhm.
And the majority of those, for sure, all of those were people who had been at the mine under Pure Gold.
Uh-huh.
And what was really interesting to me is that talking to each of those people, they all told their version of the same story, which was the sort of chaos at the mine site, the lack of detailed, clear planning and leadership. I mean, they went through mine general manager after mine general manager. Like those are results, those are symptoms of the lack of understanding of all the complexity of operating a mine. And when I heard all of those different people talk about that, I was like, well, that can be fixed.
Yeah.
That just takes experienced leadership. To
Mhm.
fix that is doable.
Sure.
And then you dive deeper and you're like, well, the resource is good and the metallurgy is good and the mill worked really well and this thing's permitted. And then I was like, oh, this suddenly got interesting. So that was what piqued my interest. And then of course that interest grew and grew and I ended up shutting down my newsletter and joining the company to be on board full time. And
I know
yeah.
lots of definition drilling we see news report after news report of definition drilling. It seems as though the actual mine now has taken a little bit of different shape than what was envisioned in the pre-feasibility study. And I imagine some of that comes from all that definition drilling and additional work that was done, not cutting corners, but actually doing the work as it's properly needed to be done. And of course, your boss, who is excellent, he's had lots of experience in building mines in the past. That's made all the difference in the world. But could you talk a little bit about the actual mine as opposed to the one that was envisioned in the pre-feasibility?
Yeah, for sure. This is a really important point. So we published that pre-feasibility study just in January, which both is and is
Mhm.
not a long
Right.
time ago. It's only 8 months ago, but in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of how quickly we've been working at Madsen, it feels like a long time ago. Um, and that pre-feasibility study was a positive result, and it, validated the effort to continue putting this mine into production. It gave the project, in Canadian dollar terms, a $500 million NPV and said it would generate over $90 million in free cash flow over its mine life. So yeah, go for it.
Mhm.
The thing about that pre-feasibility study is that it used a very low gold price in how to design the mine. It used a 3-year trailing gold price
Oh.
starting in the middle of 2024. So it used a gold price of just $1,680 US in deciding what tons of the
Mhm.
resource would likely make sense to put into the mine. And only the ones that would likely be economic at less than $1,700 gold
Mhm.
were considered in the mine plan.
Wow.
And so the result of that was a mine plan that's focused on only the highest grade bits of the
Right.
deposit. It kind of
Right.
moves down through the whole deposit quite quickly, picking out the best bits, leaving the rest of the deposit behind, and requiring quite a bit of tunneling development to get from
Hmm.
this relatively small mining
Hmm.
area to this small
Hmm.
mining area to this. So that's costly. And then the mining areas being small, that's also a bit of a higher cost mining method. They have to
Sure.
do cut and fill
Right.
mining instead of long hole. In reality, of course, we do the definition drilling, and then we do final mine design, right? That's what I said. You do the definition drilling, and then you engineer how you're actually going to design the mine. And the two things that then make that final design different from what's in the pre-feasibility study are what you find in the definition drilling and the gold price that you use in the final mine
Uh-huh.
design.
Uh-huh.
So, like you say, we've been doing lots of definition drilling, and we are fine, when the drill holes are still 20 meters apart, like they
Hmm.
were when Pure Gold did
Yeah.
this, there's lenses of gold that you just don't see. They're
Yep.
completely invisible. When you
Hmm.
tighten to 7 meters, you hit more of them.
Right.
So essentially you're adding some high grade to the zone as you do the definition drilling. That's what the drilling is adding. And then on the gold price, when you use the long-term consensus gold price in mine design, so we're using about $2,350 US per ounce in our mine design, you end up incorporating way more of like more tons likely make sense to mine at a higher gold price, right? The bar is lower, the gold with a higher gold price. That means like the really high grade vein in the middle, well, the halo mineralization around it
Yeah.
also pays to mine. And
Yes.
then you're using the wider mining method. And then instead of this area and this area with a
Right.
tunnel in between, you're taking the whole darn thing, which is way less expensive because you don't have to do all that tunneling.
Right.
So the result is you're adding some lower grade, you're adding high grade, you're taking more of the deposit, you're likely ending up with more ounces produced, longer mine life, and a more efficient mine. That's what we're working with now compared to the pre-feasibility study. Now, we don't have a new study that captures all of that. That's sort of a 2026 goal, is
Yeah.
to capture that in a new study.
Yeah.
Um, but what we do instead is just show people some comparisons about like, here's
Yeah.
what our stopes looked like before, and
Right.
here's what they look like
Right.
now. This is the mine that we're actually mining.
Right. Well, I mean, the price you're talking about is about $1,000 below what the current. So
That's where you get your margin, Jay. You got to leave room for margin.
but I have to think that maybe you're still missing. I don't know. I don't know enough about the deposit, but maybe there's still some lower grade stuff that you'd pick up under a $3,300 price. I don't know if that's the case. Do you have a sense of that?
I mean, we mine everything that makes sense to mine. And we'll even tend towards taking a bit extra if it makes sense in sort of a mine engineering sort of way,
Uh-huh.
for sure. And then of course you manage your ore by having, piles on surface. You have your low grade, you have your main grade, and then you have
Mhm.
your high grade, and then you can work your magic. The milling folk can work their magic as needed to make it all work. But for sure, the real takeaway is that the Madsen mine has a lot more to give
Mhm.
just based on what we know about the deposit right now
Right.
than that mine plan captured. And that's before we start talking about what else we might find, because this deposit hasn't seen any new exploration from a group that's down and working from underground
Mhm.
in since the 1960s, right? Like you gotta, if you want to find more mineralization around a deposit at depth, you've got to work from depth. And so we're the first group that's had the opportunity to do that, and we're really excited about what else we might find. I mean, the Red Lake mine just down the road
Yeah.
operated for 75 years. And of those, a good chunk of those years have been stellar because they keep finding these pockets
Hmm.
of particularly robust mineralization around in and around the deposit. The deposit's good, and then the pockets are really good. That's what made Goldcorp into Goldcorp, is that
Hmm.
mine. And so that we see that it's the same mineralization, it's the same potential at Madsen, and we're excited to get down there and see what else we can find. Our South Austin zone is turning into precisely one of those right now, a really, really nice area of mineralization that we're going to be mining in not very long.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, you have several mining. I mean, it looks to me like you have several mining phases as well. You can develop over time. Well, you have them already. So that should give you some optionality, perhaps, and the ability to pull more more ore out of the ground? Uh,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, optionality is arguably optionality and grade and efficiency are probably the three most important factors in an underground mine, right? You got to have
mhm,
enough gold in the rocks. You got
mhm.
to have an efficient way of moving that rock out of the mine, and then you need to have options. So like if it's because something goes wrong or if it's because something goes right or whatever the mix might be, you want to be able to make choices. You want to have choices. So optionality really matters. And like for instance, there's some optionality that already exists that's not even reflected in the mine plan, and some that we think we can flesh out that's not in the mine plan. Like there's a deposit. If this is the Madsen mine going down here, there's a deposit right here called Fork that was
Yes.
ignored
Yeah.
um, by Pure Gold, and then honestly by us initially as well, because it's a lower grade. I mean, by lower grade, I mean it's only 5 grams per ton
Uh,
gold. But then Will, our VP of Exploration, sort of remodeled it and realized that there's like a high grade core in that.
uh,
It's 8 to 9 grams per ton
uh,
and is probably 2/3 of a year's worth of ounces.
mhm.
And it's only 250 meters away from
Okay.
the mine, from the closest workings of the mine. And it's almost at surface too. So it's actually, when you talk about optionality,
Mhm.
this pod of ounces is a fantastic item for optionality. It's right near surface, so it's easy for trucking and for ventilation and for just logistics. It's not in the mine plan. We can drive over to it in probably a month's worth of development. That kind of thing really helps a mine. And so we see potential to develop similar areas. And we're doing some of that work just, as we go along. We are consistently picking away at those kinds of opportunities to give us as many options down the road as we can.
Yeah, you don't consider yourselves a commercial production. You're not in commercial production yet. What
No.
what are you going to need to see to make that to deem it commercial?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really good conversation to have right now. We're in ramp up, right? So we turned the mine on in the middle of May and we are ramping up. And I think it's a really common question right now. Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Some people think that you don't declare commercial production until you're in positive cash flow, but that's not actually it. What it really is you want to get to operational stability. So you
Hmm.
want the mine to be operating the way that you expect it to continue operating for the next little while. So that means the equipment that you need all your trucks on site. We're still waiting for some trucks. We are still waiting for some parts so that we can get the shaft going, which is an important part of how we plan to move, of how we want to move material out of the mine. So we're waiting for the rope and the skip for the shaft.
Hmm.
And then we are waiting for this. We're just ramping up this CRF batch plant, a cemented rock fill batch plant, which is a way of just storing waste material
Hmm.
underground. You crush it a bit, you mix it with some cement, and you pump it into some of the historic voids that are underground, because then you don't have to truck
Truck it
the
up.
waste all the way back out of the mine.
Yeah.
So we want that operational stability in place before we declare this mine is up and running the way that we want this mine to be running. The
Yeah.
other thing that we're waiting for commercial production, I mentioned how like you do the definition drilling and you find more high grade,
Yeah.
and then you engineer the mine at a reasonable gold price and you add more low grade as well. We need a few more months of data to understand what the result of those two grade factors is.
Hmm.
Because one really important factor in commercial production is that you give guidance, right? You say, okay,
Right.
for the next 12
Exactly.
months,
Yeah.
we expect to produce this many tons and have it average this grade. Well, we want to know before we make that statement. We want to
I
have
don't blame
confidence
you.
in that
Yeah.
statement,
Yeah.
right? So
Don't
we
blame
just need a few more months of data on how those two grade forces balance each other out, and that takes mining. So that's the other thing that's, I guess, another factor in operational stability. We need a few more pieces of equipment to be up and running, and we need a few more months of data on how those grade factors balance out. But we're getting there, and
We're
it's
getting
uh,
there.
it's exciting.
Yeah. So uh, how much tonnage can you pull a day once you have that shaft and everything in place right now as the mine stands now? How much tonnage a day do you think you can pull? Is that a number you've made public? I don't want to ask.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, the goal is to get to 800 tons a day, and we're at
Okay.
650 right now, which is, I mean, one definition that has been used of commercial production is 75% of targeted throughput.
Mhm.
That's one definition of commercial production. So based on that definition, we're already there. But
Mhm.
that's not the definition that we think
That you
is most
choose.
important.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you might have Q2 production numbers pretty soon, and
Yeah, so our
that's
quarterlies will
financials.
come out, yeah, I think later next week. Fairly like, yeah, nearing to the end of August. We have a board meeting and we're actually taking the board down to the mine next week, and when the board meeting will happen there and they'll approve those. The interesting thing during ramp up, of course, is that everybody's really keen to know what's going on at the mine, as they should be. And so we're trying to provide monthly updates. So early each month, we're looking back at what happened in the previous month. So early in September, we'll look back at what happened in July. Early in August, we looked back at what happened, or I used the wrong month there, but early in each month, but we look back at what happened the previous month.
Mhm.
Those mine site updates are actually more useful these days, I would say, for people who are watching ramp up,
Mhm.
because the quarterlies are just by definition kind of dated by the time they come out, and they are
Right.
end up being a bit of a consolidation, a summary of things that we've already talked about. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so as I look at a cross section of your mind, it just seems like it's very shallow. I mean, everything is basically it's very, very near surface, and I think this is an orogenic system. Probably it probably goes extremely deep, as many of the projects do there. So
yeah.
long after I'm gone, maybe longer and longer. No. They'll be mining this thing for a long time. I believe the successful ones, as you said, the Goldcorp mine down the road. So it seems to me like you just have almost too much to look at right there in the existing facility. But I know that you also have some other targets. There has been some talk of hub and spokes type of a project. You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the Rowan. I think you've done some economics on the Rowan. It's could really add to the production as well. Could you talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So for sure, Madsen has been explored down to about 1,200 meters,
Mhm.
1,300 meters. Of course, the depth, the intensity of drilling gets less as you go deeper because it's harder and harder. It was harder and harder to do that drilling from surface.
Mhm.
Um, there's no reason to believe that the mineralization stops there. That's just where the data stops at this point. And it's very similar deposits down the road carry on to depth for sure. So in terms of opportunity to keep going down on this thing, there's no reason to believe we won't have that opportunity. The way to bring forward value for investors soon, though,
Mhm.
isn't really by defining more or at depth,
Yeah.
because you physically have to mine your way down to it. So that's sort of by definition, that's a quite a few years down the road before that happens. So we believe that the way to bring more value for investors now is through production profile. So
Mhm.
produce more ounces, right? There's lots of reasons to argue that. The biggest one, I think, is that companies that produce more than 100,000 ounces of gold get a much better multiple
Sure. Sure.
against their net asset value than companies that produce less than 100,000 ounces of gold a year. So if we're gunning to 60, 65,000 ounces at Madsen right now, how do we grow that production profile? What do we do to make Madsen bigger?
Mhm.
And so there's a couple options to that. One would be to make to what we already talked about. So
Yeah.
find more in and around the deposit that's
Right.
optionality
Right.
that can be, so pull more from Madsen.
Right.
So that might require additional investment as we get into cash flow, additional investment so that we can pull more from Madsen. So just increase the production profile from the mine that is. Making another discovery on the Madsen land package would be fantastic. We have one target in particular that we're excited about on that. That hasn't happened yet, but that's okay. There is another discovery that we did make called Upper 8, which is in a slightly different rock package, a little bit behind, so to speak, the Madsen deposit. So there is potential to increase production profile through a completely new discovery. Again, that's a little bit down the road because you got to make the discovery, flesh it out, develop it. That's fine. But that's right in and around Madsen. The other way for West Red Lake to increase its production profile is through our other project, which is 80 kilometers away by road. You got to go
Yeah.
up and around the end of Red Lake. It's called the Rowan Project.
Yeah.
And it's got a relatively small but very high grade deposit. And importantly, it's a deposit that's really well suited to mining. It starts at surface, it's almost vertical, it's relatively wide, and it's pretty continuous. It's like it's made for mining. And so we just published an initial mine plan, a preliminary economic assessment on Rowan as a toll milling operation. So a place where you just go underground, mine the stuff, and then send that ore to another mill for processing. And that mine on its own is expected to produce, should we build it, 35,000 ounces
Right.
of gold a year.
So that would
Only
get you
5 years.
close
Hmm?
to your 100. That would get you close to your 100,000 then.
Exactly. That would get you close to your 100,000. So that's, and that's the kind of, we want to build Madsen into an important gold mine in Canada. And so we are going to pursue all the avenues that we can for that. Rowan is one of them. New discoveries is one of them. Pulling more out of Madsen is one of them. Potentially regional opportunities similar to Rowan would be another one.
Mhm.
We believe there's potential for Madsen to be a major operator, and we're going to keep pushing in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's about 8 grams, the one at Rowan. 8 grams.
Yeah, so
But
the reason,
if you were to truck it to your own mill, what would be the cost of that in terms of grams?
yeah, good question. So like the indicated resource at Rowan, if you can believe it, is 12.9 grams per ton. The indicated
Oh,
resource, it's
okay.
unbelievable. The diluted head grade once you pull it out of the
Uh-huh.
mine is 8
Uh-huh.
grams. So,
Uh-huh.
and then you generally think of losing over 80 kilometers, you lose about a gram. It's not that you
Okay.
physically lose it, you just think of the cost of
Yeah, the
trucking
cost of
is equivalent to as if you lost. So yeah, call it 7 or a bit better than 7. It's
mm,
usually like 1 gram per 100 kilometers. We're not quite
yeah.
doing 100 kilometers. But yeah, so trucking it, it would still be absolutely worth putting through a mill.
So do you think that will be something that possibly comes online sooner? Or do you think there might be some of those other things you were talking about, the fork or whatever that other one was? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to
Yeah,
say,
so
but just
Fork will pull into the mine plan just as like
real
it will
quick.
just become part of the planning of Madsen. It
Right.
will, I
Okay.
don't know whether we will mine it in 2026 or it'll be
Yeah.
2027, but Fork will become part of
Yeah.
planning how we
Makes
attack
sense. Right.
Madsen.
200 meters away.
It's
Okay.
exactly, it's right there.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also like it's like when we talk about optionality, if there were ever a time that we needed to shut down the shaft for 2 months to do a project to make the shaft bigger or something,
Hmm. Hmm.
having Fork right there at surface
Keep
is
things rolling.
exactly the kind of thing that would make that possible. So like these are important
Yeah.
thoughts to
Very
have.
important. Yeah.
Um, the timing for Rowan is certainly about engineering and then permitting. So our
Mm.
goal is to push Rowan towards a pre-feasibility level of engineering over the next 6 to 8 months and then publish that. And that, as much as getting a study out the door again, is really about informing a permit application. We believe, just based on similar projects in Ontario in recent years, that we could be breaking ground at Rowan in late 2027.
Hmm.
Now, there's also been a new bill in Ontario called Bill C5 that is specifically about expediting the permitting process for projects like Rowan.
Good.
So there might be a chance that it could be permitted faster, but end of 2027 doesn't even consider that possible it being faster. So yeah, I mean, and what's really cool is that Madsen, at least based on the pre-feasibility plan, by the time you get to 2028, when Rowan could potentially be adding to West Red Lake's production profile, Madsen is starting to get into the real guts of it, like deeper, higher grade,
Higher
starting to
grade.
get into the 8 zone. I mean,
Hmm.
based on the PFS, Madsen on its own is producing almost 100,000 ounces in 2028. So like there's inherent scale or inherent growth already laid out, and we want to build on that.
Yeah, I guess your average grade's going through the mill now, more or less. Well, not now, but let's say when you get into the sweet stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we expect it to be in line with what we mined in the bulk sample, which was like 5.5 to 6.5 grams per ton.
Okay.
That's our expectation at this point. Again, we're waiting for more data to understand the balance of this high and low grade additions, but that's our expectation right now.
Hmm. And the mill, can you expand that? I mean, what is the mill capacity right now?
Yeah, yeah. So
If you need to, let's say you get really lucky and you start finding a lot more
yeah,
material.
yeah.
What is the capacity now and can you expand it?
Yeah, so that's a very important question. So the mill is built, the nameplate capacity of the mill is 1,089 tons. So the
Mhm.
easier way to think of that is that Pure Gold reliably ran the mill to 1,200 tons. So you can consider it in terms of ability a 1,200 ton per day mill.
Mhm.
It is currently permitted at 800 tons per day. And
Oh,
that's just what it was re-permitted at after bankruptcy. And so
oh,
our current capacity is 800 tons per day.
mhm.
But it has 50% additional capacity that just, of course, requires a permit amendment that's
Mhm.
all about tailings management and water treatment. So
Right.
as we do consider, permitting at Rowan and mill expansion at Madsen, these
Mhm.
things are very interrelated in terms
Sure.
of how you would navigate the permit amendment at the Madsen mine and then the permit at Rowan. Those are certainly interrelated in our hope.
Mhm.
Um, and then the mill was also built so that for a reasonably modest investment, estimated quite a few years ago at something like 20 million Canadian dollars. That's, like I say, a dated estimate, but
Yeah.
for something like that investment, you could add another 300 tons per day of capacity. So bring it up to 1,500 tons per day. So there is a lot of potential for this mill to
Mhm.
process more mineralization as we go through the steps to get it there.
Mhm. Well, it certainly seems as though things are working out pretty well. When do you think you might be able to show a profit?
Ah,
Well, I'm
I mean,
putting you on the spot there,
yeah, for sure.
but I mean, with the gold prices where they are now, and who knows, right?
Yeah. So the site update that we put out 2 weeks ago now that was about July. I mean, that was a very good month. July worked really well at the mine.
Mhm.
We're always very cautious to talk about profitability before we're in
Right,
commercial production. It's
right.
not really an area that we can comment on, but it was a very good month in July
Mhm.
for sure. Ramp up is by its nature not stable. Like I say, the goal is operational stability. We're not there yet. So I'm not going to say that every month is going to be July consistently. But July was a really good month. And so that's our goal is to keep
Yeah.
producing Julys until we're ready to say that we're in commercial production and to just keep pushing the message that, for gold investors, I mean, I think you'd agree with this, Jay. Like, if you want to have exposure to the gold market, you can obviously play explorers. And if
Mhm.
you get a winner there, you can have an incredible ride. But you often don't.
Yeah.
That's the nature of that beast, as you and I
Tell me
know
about it.
very, very, very well.
Yeah. We both
Um,
know. Yeah.
but the more reliable way to get extra leverage in a gold bull market is through producers that are providing growing production, new and growing production profiles. And there's just not very many miners out there doing that because so many projects got stopped in their tracks during this really long bear market for gold stocks that
Mhm.
hardly any projects continued their march towards production. So West Red Lake we're really excited to be one of not very many companies that's new with production and have real focus on increasing that production profile as we go through this gold market. So our goal is to generate returns for our stakeholders, and we're really focused on that.
Well, July was a good month. August, you're not telling me yet. September, so Q3 we'll be watching, and then you've got to put out your numbers, the financials, and so
Exactly.
forth. So fingers crossed. Good.
Exactly.
But it's more than fingers crossed because one thing I wanted to ask you about, maybe just a quick comment before we finish, the management team, starting with Shane Williams. I mean, he's very good, isn't he?
Shane is one of the main reasons that I joined the company for sure. So, Shane is a mine builder. He's worked for a whole bunch of companies. A big chunk of his career was for Eldorado Gold, and he was, leadership on the mine building teams for Eldorado in Greece, in Turkey, and then in Quebec when they built the Lamaque mine in
Mhm.
Quebec. And
Yeah.
prior to that, he worked for Rio Tinto and he worked for the Lundin Group. I mean, he moved his family all over the world. For 25 years building mines.
Mhm.
So, when our West Red Lake's secret weapon, core strength, is that he understands the unique strength that is build and operate expertise. And
Mhm.
he built a team that has that. And it's not very common in junior mining to have build and operate expertise.
Mhm.
It's just a lot, there's a lot of people who are very good at the exploration side of
Right.
things and even getting things to, the preliminary economic
Yeah.
assessment or even permitting that. But the actual build,
Building,
that's
yeah,
hard.
that's hard.
That's the complicated part of the machine.
And the skill sets are just so different. So it's
So different.
so different.
And so he really pointedly built a team that has that experience and that is he calls us like mid-career because he wants us to stay together for the next 10 years and build a major mining company. So like he's a very good leader and he's pointedly built a team that he thinks has the ability to do exactly that. So it's a good group to work with. I've learned a lot and it's a hard-working, expertise-filled, uh, good, kind group of people. I really like it here.
You like the people. That's important
Yeah.
too. You've been there about a year now, a little more than a year.
It's time
Huh?
flies, Jay. I've been here like a year and a half. It's
Okay. All
crazy.
right.
Yeah.
You're having fun. I'm
I
seeing
am, for sure.
I'm
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
you smile a lot now today. And you smiled a lot at the Metals Investor Forum as well,
I
but now yeah, it's coming together. Any closing thoughts? I guess what catalyst? I guess we'll just keep watching the development of things, and it looks like from
yeah.
what I can see things are going well.
Yeah, I mean, we want to keep giving people, like we always say that Madsen's a show me story, right? Like this mine failed spectacularly less than 3 years ago and blew up a whole lot of shareholder value.
Sure.
So in order to earn for West Red Lake to be valued in the market as the operator of a successful new high-grade gold mine in Canada, we need to provide evidence that Madsen is that. No
Hmm.
one was going to give us credit ahead of time
Hmm.
for like the idea that we were going to have a successful high-grade gold mine because of that recent failure of this mine.
Yeah.
But we're now like we're in the phase now where we're just handing out that evidence, right? We did the bulk sample, we started up the mine, we're doing monthly updates, we're heading towards commercial production, and so that's what's really important for us is to keep providing that evidence so that the market can decide to hopefully continue to re-rate West Red Lake towards that, operator status. And it's pretty exciting. And along the way, I mean that zone that we're delineating in South Austin that has just really phenomenal high grade drill intercepts over like big widths, like 114 grams per ton over 10 meters, things like that. This is what Red Lake gives. Red Lake is a hard place to mine. You got to
Yeah.
do 7 meter drill centers. You got to do like it's hard.
Yeah.
It's narrow vein, high grade gold mining. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But when you put in the work, you can get some real benefit for that work. And so what we're seeing in South Austin, which is just one part of the deposit, phenomenal. We're going to be mining that in the first half of 2026. We have really good hopes of finding similar zones in other places fairly close to where we're already operating. Because that's why we're here. Madsen is a good deposit as it is, but we think it has potential to be a lot more than what it is. So those are the two things to watch for is the evidence that the mine is working and then evidence that we're succeeding in our goal to show that it's got more to give.
Well, I think there's a lot of reason to be confident. Those of us who've been watching the operation under Shane Williams, there's reason to be confident because he's very systematic. He obviously knows what he's doing when it comes to building mines, and you can see how he's de-risked the project as time moved on. So I'm very excited about it as well. It's one of my favorite producers for sure. So Gwen, I want to thank you so much. I know your time is very precious with the family and full-time. Yeah, you're a very active person, high energy lady yet still. Really, well, you better be. You're a lot younger than I am. So
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you again,
okay,
Jay. And of course,
really
I
great.
send my wishes through that glass door behind you to Teresa.
I will do that.
So
Yeah.
good to see you.
Thank you so much. All right, folks. Well, that's it for today. I think later this week yet, I'm going to be talking to somebody at Hydrograph Clean Power. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that.
I'll tune back in for that.